and welcome back to the very first episode of the DC Original Animated Film Live Show for 2021. I am very excited to be back. I mean, you would think that at this point in time, I'm all comic charactered out after my entire new direction of my channel, but no. You see, Bruce Timm's animated universe is just as important to me as the source material itself. And of course, I am very excited to have my friend Cammy over at Cammy's Corner back. And I'm also really hoping that I'm not stretching her out too badly because she's practically a part of this channel now. You've seen her here. You've seen her on The Old, the New, and the Awesome, which just premiered this year as well. And I have a strange feeling that by the time this year is over, she will be attached to like 20 other projects on this channel. But Cammy, either way, it is always great to have you here.
Always a pleasure to be here, Steve. No, I am having a lot of fun with this journey, and the comic book world is so much more vast than I anticipated. I mean, I knew there was a lot for me to absorb and learn, but I'm having a lot of fun with this. So no, in no way am I burnt out yet.
Well, I would not be surprised if at some point in time, a movie that we reviewed, if its source material ends up being discussed over on That's Comical with either Dan or Andy or both, don't be surprised if I ask you to join us for an episode or two, especially when it comes to the comic book and film comparison, because we are going to do a few of those.
I would be honored. As a matter of fact, I was just thinking that last night while I was prepping for all of this. I'm like, that would be kind of cool if I could talk to some comic book nerds and kind of, get my way in there after I get some, not necessarily info, but at least some more history of comics under my belt, I guess we'll say.
Absolutely. That would be great. Even though the three of us over on that show are not the greatest of experts. We know our stuff, but we all know for a fact there are much more powerful minds when it comes to the entirety of the 80-plus year history, and that's why when I have these types of shows, I always shout out the channels like Wes over at Thinking Critical and Bill over at Comic Book University and Rob over at Comics Explained and Perch over at Comics by Perch. These guys are much more solidified in the lore than we are, but we are still big fans and we still love talking about all of this stuff. And I'm very excited to talk about today's series of films because when we actually finish this episode, to a certain degree, we are now officially caught up in regards to the releases that keep getting added to the DC Animated Original Film Library. And I always make this joke whenever I'm reviewing one single film on my DCU Update solo videos. This library is literally catching up to the Disney Canon Classic Library at this pace. That is terrifying.
There is a lot of, and that's the crazy thing is that, on my free time, I want to get kind of caught up on my own, but there is just so much to watch and to read. So it's a lot, especially for a newbie like me who at least thought I knew a few things. I have so much more to learn.
It gets you so into it because of the vast amount of information and stories that are out there. That's why I truthfully feel, even though you will see some negative news regarding specifically the big two companies, Marvel and DC, it couldn't be a better time to get started in the vast library of comics because there are just so many great stories to read. And yeah, you're going to find some duds every now and again. Not going to say that I haven't been disappointed, especially in recent days, but I still do just love picking up these books and reading these stories. And I say this to so many people on camera and off. If it wasn't for me deciding to go back into reading comic books in 2019, I seriously think I wouldn't have survived the pandemic in 2020. I think that year would have broken me completely, but thanks to these stacks and stacks of comics that I just decided to get my hands on, it saved me. It lowered my stress levels. It really helped me managed to get through 2020, and 2021 just looks a little brighter every single day as every single day comes by. But I'm not gonna lie, every week I always say I'm suffering from comic book withdrawal. I read my new books and then I have to wait a whole week for the new books to come in, and it's killing me every week now. I can't deal with it anymore. I hate it.
It's like the old school days when you watched a show, you know, your weekly favorite show, and you had to wait a whole week for the new episode to come out. Yeah, it's kind of like that. But I think you'll be excited to know, Steve, and this is all you working magic here, that I subscribe to Cosmicology. So now I'm getting comics on the regular, and I find myself every time I go into like Target or Walmart or something like that, now I'm stopping and actually picking up the new releases. So I actually just picked up the new DC animated The Soul of the Dragon. So that's on my bucket list to watch this week.
Oh, yes. We will definitely be featuring that one as well as the rest of the 2021 releases once the last installment has officially released towards the end of this year. And I'm really excited. But you know what? Let's get into the movies that we're going to be discussing today. So for all of you who have been watching all of this time since the very beginning when Brian and I started this show, thank you all so much for watching, especially for all of you that are new. I hope you are enjoying the shows. But if you want to see more of this show, please don't forget to leave a like as well as a comment, because Cammie and I would love to talk to you. And if you want to see Cammie on a couple of the other crazy shenanigans shows that are happening over here on this channel, as well as everything else here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you're up to date with us and all of our newest content. So from the beginning, I've been telling everybody that this DC library is split up into various books, and today we're going to be wrapping up book number 7 and starting on the brand new book 8, which is really taking these DC animated stories in very interesting directions. But we're going to start with a little bit of nostalgia. I'm not going to say for the both of us, because I never asked Cammie this specific question, and that question is, Cammie, did you watch any of the old Bruce Timm animated shows like Justice League or Superman or Batman?
Justice League, yes. I have been a huge Justice League fan since I was a kid. And I think that really the draw for me there has always just been Batman. Because, you know, I can speak praises on this. My only true understanding of comics prior to engaging with you was the Batman universe, you know, anything to do with Gotham City and all of the supervillains within that world. So Justice League just kind of pulled me in because Batman was part of that group. Now, to say I'm a Justice League expert is an absolute farce, because I still don't know a lot about Superman or Wonder Woman, but having dove into these 3 films, I'm just learning so much more about the 2 of them and Lex Luthor, and it's just a really exciting experience for me, because it kind of opens up what I already knew about the Justice League. So yeah, in terms of that, Justice League was really my only saving grace.
Then I'm pretty sure that Justice League versus the Fatal Five was a film that you truly appreciated, because it actually was a continuation of the Justice League television show storyline, which of course is classified as the DC animated universe that started with Batman the Animated Series. So not only did we get a continuation of that storyline, we also saw the return of Kevin Conroy voicing Batman, Susan Eisenberg to voice Wonder Woman, and George Newbern voicing Superman. So it was really exciting to go back to that Bruce Timm universe, because I think it's something that all of us who appreciate the original work of Bruce Timm, it's something that we all appreciated, but also at the same time, it was also very exciting to see some new characters and of course, some additional familiar faces showing up here and there throughout this entire film. And I also want to reference a comment that you made when Stacy and I and you were talking on our pilot episode of The Old, the New, and the Awesome, how you had become obsessed with the Legion of Superheroes. So I'm pretty sure that this specific movie also hit that hot button for you.
Yes, I am completely enamored with the Legion of Superheroes, and this just, I mean, right from the get-go, you have three of the Legions, you have Starboy, you have Saturn Girl, you have Brainiac 5, and that just, I was like, okay, I'm here for this. This movie is already going to be great. I'm going to have the Justice League, I've got my Legion of Superheroes. So yeah, this movie already started off packing a punch for me.
Yeah, and I also was excited to see how they were going to rope these two periods in time together, because the Fatal Five actually did make a very small appearance in the last season of Justice League Unlimited, when Supergirl actually goes forward in time and then comes to the decision that she's actually going to stay in the future and become a member of the Legion of Superheroes. But the character that we got introduced to was Starboy, and I actually didn't know anything about Starboy. So I got to admit that that was very exciting. But of course, the reason why I knew that I was going to love this movie was the first moment where Superman shows up, when he saves that group of children, and when he's holding that gigantic stone globe, you hear the classic Superman animated series song in the background. I was like, I am loving every minute or second of this moment. Like, I love the fact that they brought it back even throughout the film. You also hear a little bit of the original Justice League theme song and the Justice League Unlimited theme song. I was so happy to see all of these great nostalgic things brought back, because that's what got me into this universe. I love it. All of it.
And that's, for me, is the joy of going back and watching this, because like you said, it's those little Easter eggs that they throw in, knowing that the animators that are working on these projects now are, you know, mostly people of our generation that grew up on these same cartoons that we're referencing and that we love, and they're just building on those worlds. And to throw that in, it's kind of like saying, hey, we're still here, we're doing these cartoons for you. And it's actually a beautiful time to be a part of this universe and to watch these characters in all their different multiverses, because you're not only getting that joy of yesteryear, but you're getting that continuation of the people of our generation, you know, people that we grew up with, that grew up watching these same shows, that have that same passion for driving that story further and advancing these characters and their storylines. And so yeah, just to hear those little nuggets of things as you're watching, it's like, it gets you excited. It not only takes you back, but it projects you forward and like, oh, give me more, you know?
Yeah, and I also really appreciated the fact that even though it would have been great to see the original Justice League roster, it was really cool to see that even after Justice League Unlimited ends, the roster of the Justice League is still growing. I really appreciated the fact that we got Mr. Terrific in this movie, because they had only scratched the surface of Mr. Terrific in the original show, because there's a point in time in the Justice League Unlimited series where Martian Manhunter, John Jones, actually had to just leave, to just gather his bearings because of a very traumatic point during the show. So Mr. Terrific took over his position. But I also really appreciated the fact that they were also still recruiting. And as someone who also loves the show Young Justice, it was really cool to see Ms. Martian getting her first appearance in this original animated universe, but also seeing Jessica Cruz, because I am a big Green Lantern fan. I really am. And we obviously got Green Lantern for the very first time in this universe. On Superman the Animated Series, we got Kyle Rayner, but it wasn't until Justice League that we got John Stewart in full force, and I really appreciated the fact that Bruce Timm and company chose to use John Stewart, because he was a Green Lantern that not many people really knew much about. But they also had Hal Jordan show up in an episode or two, and in this movie they even hinted at Guy Gardner. But I really appreciated that they wanted to go towards the newer Green Lanterns. I mean, do I feel that there would have been some fans that would have been happy to see Simon Baz, because he's also one of the newer Green Lanterns? He came out during the New 52 era of DC Comics in 2011, 2012. But I also really appreciated the fact that they gave us Jessica Cruz, because she was a character that I really wasn't too familiar with. But I also really appreciated that they used her because of one of the major plot points of this film, which I also have to say am quite surprised that they wanted to make this movie not just a great action film, but they also wanted to make the audiences a little bit more aware about mental health. I really, really was surprised by that. But I also feel that even though this movie was preaching a certain topic, they built a great story around it. And that's why I loved the story that unfolded with Jessica Cruz and Starboy.
Well, and not only that, but we're starting to also see very powerful female leads too, where the female carries and drives the story. And I think that was important. You know, I know that you said that people that are more familiar with the Green Lantern storyline and so forth would have liked to have seen maybe more of the older nostalgia, but this worked quite perfectly for me because it not only intrigued me into learning more about the whole Green Lantern idea, and because I know that it's very vast. I know that there's a lot that goes on. There's several different colors of lanterns and there's a whole other world and all of this, but it really does help to kind of get you focused in the present and the now, but also gives you just kind of a look back of that nostalgia, and it doesn't overwhelm you with the past. So someone like me who's just learning gets a great story, very female forward, very well driven, modern, you know, story pretenses, like you were saying, with a great focus on mental health and self-care. And then you get this kind of backstory as to where it's taking her. And then you had also mentioned, you know, Miss Martian, which we'll get to in a little bit, but that for me was like a new chapter in Justice League as well. So yeah, there was a lot of exciting new elements with just a tinge of the old, and I think it complemented each other very well.
Yeah, I mean, they did talk about the fact that John was off-world and that Hawkgirl was on another mission, so it was nice to see that they were just tipping the hat saying, don't worry, we're not changing your classic Justice League. We are continuing to evolve, but those heroes that you know and love are still part of your favorite team. They're just not here right now. Although, if I am going to nitpick, I will say it would have been fun just to have the Flash, because I love Michael Rosenbaum as the Flash in the DC animated universe. I just think that when it comes to comic relief, it would have been great to have him there. But I am going to give the dynamic between Batman and Miss Martian so much props, because that was most of your comic relief right there. I mean, you want to talk about great nostalgic moments? The scene where Miss Martian literally gets Batman to freeze in his tracks when she morphs into Robin to remind him that he does mentor young heroes. I thought that that was such a great idea to do it. I loved that.
I laughed out loud at that part. The dynamic between Batman and Miss Martian was spot on. I laughed every time there wasn't a joke that fell flat for me. She kept him on his toes. I mean, he kept, you know, that Batman kind of sulky, dark persona, but you could tell that he was kind of taken aback by her, like, hey, this girl's got something. I'm not going to tell her she does, but she's definitely keeping me moving and shaking here. So yeah, that was great. And even Wonder Woman had some fantastic comic relief in this, where they're in a battle scene and she stops and she's like, oh darn, I broke a nail, you know, just little things like that. It was like great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the few things that this animated universe never holds back on, and that's the action. There is a great deal of action in this movie, though to a certain degree, I do kind of feel that that is probably the greatest weakness, if anything, for the film, because there are some points in time where it's just way too much action. But that's because of the fact that it's the Fatal Five. Because one of the few things is, I don't read many Legion of Superheroes comic books, but one of the few things that I notice about the Fatal Five is that they are unlike any of the present hero rogues galleries ever. They are just truly brutal killers. They're not like the Joker or Lex Luthor. Like, they don't play with their food. They just go in for the kill and eat the remains. That's all the Fatal Five is known for. They are a brutal bunch of villains. They are all action and no talk. And that's what makes them such a unique threat, especially to heroes like Batman and Superman, etc.
Oh yeah, you could definitely sense the fear on them. You know, as soon as the Fatal Five was detected as being the villains here, they were all over it. You know, we need to kill and destroy here, because if we don't jump in, they will destroy us. And I think that makes for a really good plot line too, because so often, you know, at least for me, having grown up with comics and maybe just not being as privy to real life situations, you know, because the kid in me was just trying to focus on the fun elements of the comic as the cartoon. But now as an adult, kind of reading between the lines and seeing the reality of these storylines, you do realize that some of these characters are just plain evil. And you know, the horror queen in me lives for that. So I was all over the Fatal Five, but even for me, they're really intense. You know, they aim to kill, and they don't take any you know, prisoners for a waste of time. I mean, they go in with an intent and they see that through. There's no, you know, they make sure that whatever is on their mind, they go there and they see it through, so they can get to, you know, the next point without having to worry about any mess to clean up. It's just like, okay, annihilated, let's move on to the target goal here. And it's really great, and it keeps for that movement of the plot.
Yeah, and I also want to double back a little bit to what you said about very female-centric. If there's one thing that DC does so well that Marvel is still struggling with, is that they really know how to create great female characters, not just heroes, but villains as well. And you can see that in the Emerald Empress. She really is one of the most bloodthirsty villains that DC has to offer. Like, she can be just as bad as some of the male villains in the DC world. And that's what makes her such a fan favorite, especially to people who love the Legion of Superheroes.
She's bloodthirsty, and I think that was one of the things that I was immediately drawn to with her, you know, because initially when you open up the film, you've got Mono and Thorok and Persuader, and so you're thinking, man, these guys are just it, they're the real deal. And they are nothing in comparison to when Emerald Empress takes the screen. She basically squashes them, and she's just like, oh, it's about time you arrived and saved me from, you know, my fatal entrapment here. You know, where the hell have you been? Now let's actually get to work. And it's like, oh, snap, let's make this happen, you know? And she kind of revives the film at that point, but she is just ruthless, absolutely ruthless. So she makes an amazing villain, but she's solid, you know? And like you said, they have an ability to write these very strong female characters, but they're not just a page holder. They actually carry a story, or are the story. And I think that is so important.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, when you actually see this movie, you actually believe, or at least assume, that the story is going to be about Starboy's journey home back to his time, when in fact the story really is about Jessica Cruz trying to overcome her fears and actually take on the responsibility of being a Green Lantern, because that's what makes the Green Lantern lore so interesting to me. And it never makes sense as to why they don't make more of these Green Lantern centric stories, because there are so many great animated films that we can get from the Green Lantern's lore, regardless of which Green Lantern leads the story. I didn't know much about Jessica Cruz, so I didn't know that she was suffering from anxiety because of events that happened in her past. And like a lot of Green Lanterns, when they find out about this responsibility, do they always want it? No, they don't. But the funny thing is, sometimes when you say you don't want to be a Green Lantern, the ring will actually leave you and move on. But the Guardians just saw something in this woman, and it was not just for the sake of having her become a member of the Green Lantern Corps. They were also trying to give her some help to overcome these fears. So for her specific point of view, becoming a Green Lantern is really supposed to be like some kind of a medicine to help her with her anxiety and try and get her on the path to recovery, because she and Starboy's interesting point is the fact that when he is in his time, there are actually medicines that help with a lot of mental conditions. But when he doesn't have that medicine, you see what it turns him into. I mean, look, I gotta say, even though there are some parts in this scene that make me laugh, the scene where he's in the pharmacy and he's trying to get his medicine, yes, it's funny, but at the same time, you really feel bad for him, because you know that he's dealing with a problem.
No, I mean that's a real moment. Honestly, that there was some humanity in that moment, because when he's in the pharmacy, you know, he's having a conversation with himself at the counter before he even addresses the pharmacist, and he's, you know, trying to make sense of it all. You know, he's very much aware that the only medicine vial he had was destroyed upon landing, but he's like, okay, how do I make this happen? And he's very much cognizant that the medicine he needs does not exist in the universe that he's in. So he's trying to think, and you know, it's almost genius in a way, because he's going through the different types of medicines that would be here in this present time. Okay, well, this would work and this would work. Okay, I need this, you know. And so to see that humanizes it, and it just makes you wonder, you know, anyone that is going through a mental condition that needs medication daily just to function, how it must feel if they can't afford that, if it's not readily available to them, if they run out of it, if it's destroyed, you know, all of these things. So it humanizes these moments for just a split second. And like you said, it takes the comedy out of it and it puts it into a human perspective. And I was going to kind of touch on that when you were talking about Jessica Cruz's struggles. For me, I think that in this, having that inability to have access to the medicine that he needs in this universe, being Starboy and having the epic role that he carries in this film was really his medicine, his mental health drive. So I feel that there was kind of, I don't want to say equal, because you definitely don't want to compare oranges to apples when it comes to mental health. Obviously, right. Jessica and, you know, Starboy were going through two very different things for different reasons. But I think that in the finality, what Starboy was able to achieve by helping the universe that he's presently in really did give him his own sense of medicine. You know, it gave him a sense of calm. It gave him a sense of purpose.
And to a certain degree, his acts were somewhat Jessica Cruz's medicine, because she sees a guy who is also struggling with a mental condition. Like you said, we can't really compare apples to oranges here, because it's two very different issues when it comes to mental health. But she sees this guy who actually is still able to be this great hero. And even though he's struggling with his mental health throughout the film, he still knows that he is meant for good things. He still knows that he's a hero. And Jessica is looking at him, she goes, wow, you know, if he can be able to be a great hero, even with his situation, maybe I can be too.
And I think that works so well. It's funny, you know, because I know that you've said sometimes there's so much going on, but if you can just kind of follow these stories individually for a minute, the way that they masterfully blend, it works so well, because then you can also get stories within stories within stories that kind of drive other points along. So, you know, you can look at Jessica Cruz as her own entity, you can look at Starboy as his own entity, but when you combine them, the way that they push each other and they don't even realize it sometimes is just so powerful and impactful as a viewer of this movie. So very important there too. But yeah, this whole storyline works so well.
Yeah, and the other funny thing is when you take a look at Miss Martian, when she's with them, like, she's like, yeah, okay, I'm with a couple of younger heroes, but at the same time, it's so funny because she, to a certain degree, still feels like she's out of place, because she's getting constantly pushed by Batman. And when I love that little moment where she and Jessica and Starboy are all at that table eating something, and you can tell that Miss Martian still feels like she's out of place there.
Well, she's essentially having a conversation with herself. I mean, the two of them, Starboy and Jessica, are you know, conversing about, I think, his medicine or something about that, and they're going on and they're not including her. So she's basically interjecting her own thoughts into this conversation, like, I'm here too, kind of, you know. And then they say something else, and she's finally like, well, yeah, I'll just leave you two to it, and gets up and walks away, you know.
Yeah.
So it's comedic, but it's probably not intended to be comical. But that just does go to show you that Miss Martian truly believes that she is the third wheel, and that she doesn't have the ability, because like you said, she keeps getting put down where she thinks she belongs, and that's in the Justice League.
Well, that's what it's all about, because what she's trying to do is she's also trying to find her place. Like, she knows that that she can be a great heroine. I mean, I was actually a little bit surprised that they really didn't have any moments where she talked about living in her uncle's shadow. Like, she doesn't really talk much about that, but you can definitely tell that. And even at the end of the movie, she even gets her own happy ending. Like, she actually gets her place, which is really, really nice, because at the end of the day, Batman always knew that there was a good hero in Miss Martian. He just wanted to see how far she could go. And that's what he always does with any of the young people that he takes on with him.
But yet again, that comedic relief was on point right
Absolutely.
to the end, because Batman is the one that tells her, well, there's a place for you if you still, will have it. And then she's like, oh, cool. So, like, I got voted in. He goes, well, I didn't tell you who voted for you,
But again, that's just Kevin Conroy doing what he does best. We really didn't get too much of that when he first took on the role of Batman in Batman the Animated Series, but as the universe kept extending and we ended up getting Superman and then the Justice League came in, then we really got to see Kevin Conroy. And even in Batman Beyond, we really got to see him give Batman so many different levels to his character. I think one of my favorite things, and to a lot of people, it is their favorite thing, it was an episode of Justice League where Cersei turns Wonder Woman into a pig, and Zatanna is in the episode too. And in order for Wonder Woman to be changed back, Cersei wants Batman to reveal a hidden secret of his that he has tried so hard to hide for all these years. And it's the fact that he actually has an amazing singing voice. And that is Kevin Conroy singing in that episode. And it's beautiful. It's one of the most different, most unique moments in all of DC animation. And that's why I love that Kevin Conroy still will come back to voice this character whenever he is asked. Like, it's impossible for him not to. I mean, look, there are people that don't like to be typecasted, but people need to understand something. Kevin Conroy has no issue being typecasted as Batman because the fans just adore him for voicing Batman.
Oh, I felt the same way with Bruce Timm as Two-Face. I mean, that really took me back. Just hearing that voice again, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I mean, he really does completely solidify Two-Face for me. And it would kind of be an interesting thing if we ever get a story between Starboy and Two-Face makes an appearance, because the dynamic between those two on screen works so well when they were in the Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
I loved how he played to his darker side, and so I could really see that maybe being a turn of events, where Starboy takes a dark turn and he tries to get pulled in by the dark side, so to speak. I just think that Two-Face would do a really great job of that. And then you do get bits and pieces of like Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy for a second. That's kind of cool too. I mean, in comparison to the Emerald Empress, they're nothing on this screen, but it does give you kind of a segue that maybe there could be a darker side to some of these characters. I mean, I know inevitably everything is always good will prevail over evil, and we always hope that we get the best for the characters, but sometimes it's kind of cool to see that darker side too. So I definitely want to give hats off to Bruce Timm as Two-Face though, because that did it for me.
Yeah, but
that was great.
But as I said earlier in the day, I don't necessarily think that this was the best movie of the bunch. I mean, the nostalgia hits you like a brick, especially if you've been watching the original shows. I mean, if I was going to rate this based on my usual rating, it's definitely going to get a 3.5 out of 4 stars. But like I said, I think that the weakness of the film was that there was just way too much action, and I wanted to see some more plot development. But the only things that I'm hoping for is that they will continue to revisit this universe in some shape or form moving forward with some future films, because it would be great to see some more of these DC Animated Universe films, because we miss that universe. We'd love to see it again. I would love to see some more characters, but between you and me, We've gotten a few inklings throughout time with these shows of the Legion of Superheroes, but I think what we really need is we need a true Legion of Superheroes movie in this universe, because we had a couple of them show up in Superman the Animated Series. We saw them show up again in Justice League Unlimited, but I really think that we need some more of these Bruce Timm created versions of these characters in their own standalone movie. I mean, I say that one of the biggest problems with DC animation when it comes to these movies is we're still getting way too much of Superman and way too much Batman, and even at this point in time, way too much Justice League. I really want to see them branch out and capture some of these other characters.
I think it's just selling points, really. I mean, at the end of the day, they know the big name superheroes are going to sell, and it's going to bring people to the table. It's going to get people talking, and then if they can kind of just throw in these little tidbits. But I think possibly that is what we're looking at here, because there's been a couple of films in recent months that we've watched that have included the Legion of Superheroes. So I think maybe they're just kind of getting a palate taste for us and saying, hey, how do you like this? How are these characters developing for you? And eventually they will throw something our way. But I think for now, the bigger names and the bigger groups of characters like the Justice League and so forth do carry these smaller characters until we get more cast development or character development from these creators.
Yeah, I mean, I will let you know that I don't know if you've watched the show Young Justice. It's not part of the DC animated universe, but it is a DC animated show, and it's wonderful. At the end of season 3, there was a tease for the next season that the Legion of Superheroes are going to show up. So I'm hoping that we're going to get to see a bunch of them in season 4 of Young Justice. And as of now, 3 seasons long, the show has not disappointed me. I think it's a very well put together show. And it would be really cool to see the Legion of Superheroes alongside some of the younger heroes in the DC universe. So I'm really curious to see how they're going to do that. So how would you rate this specific movie based on your own rating system?
On my own rating system, I definitely give it a thumbs up. Of the 3 films that we're going to talk about and review today, this actually came in my second favorite of the 3. So it hit a lot of plot points that were very solid for me. I was always entertained. There wasn't a lull in anything. I would just have to agree with you in terms of there was a lot going on, and I just felt like anytime you got really immersed in one specific plot line, then you were driven somewhere else, which is okay. I mean, it makes for great action, but it doesn't make for a lot of developed plot.
Well, I have a feeling I know what your number one of these 3 is, and I think it's going to be the one that we're about to discuss, which was a movie that I was so excited to see when it got announced, because I have heard about the source material and how amazing this story was. So did I get a little bit nervous that I was going to be seeing the movie before I had a chance to read the source material? Sure. But at the same time, I said to myself, if there's one thing that it's going to do, is it's going to drive me to try and find the source material. And that, of course, is Superman Red Sun, which is based on the famous Mark Millar limited series. And I actually have the surprise, I do now officially have the source material. So I am so excited to read this story, and I am certain that I am going to be talking about this book on That's Comical very, very soon. I haven't read it yet, but it's 3 volumes. I am really excited to read these 3 issues, because I will say that the movie, it did not disappoint. This was one of the most unique stories involving the DC universe that I have ever watched.
Yeah, hands down, this was my favorite film of the 3. This blew me out of the water from start to finish. I love history. You know this. I'm a huge history buff, so the historical elements in this, to learn about this new phrase that you have mentioned to me, the Elseworlds, which the Elseworlds rather, which this definitely falls under. This is something that I would love to explore now, knowing what that means and what it is. I actually watched this film 3 times, Steve. That's how much I love this film. I was blown away by this. Every time I was just looking for something that I may have missed. I was very into it. And, you know, the only reason I had avoided it initially is because, again, you know me, I'm a Batman girl. So I thought that this was going to be completely immersed about Superman, which, yes, Superman drives the plot, but there's so much more going on in this film. And it really blew me away. It was so well done. It was incredibly well written. And I enjoyed it from start to finish. So we'll talk about all the plot points, but yes, this was definitely the highlight of these 3 films.
Yes, you talked about Elseworlds. For all of you out there who have never gotten to hear much about that, Elseworlds is a series of DC comic books that takes the DC universe and puts them into alternate timelines, alternate points in history. Some examples are Gotham by Gaslight. It's also a movie now in the world of DC animation, probably one of the best that they've ever made, and it's basically the entire Batman lore put into the turn of the 20th century, where Batman is hunting down Jack the Ripper. So, Cammie, that's a story that's right up your alley. I was actually really curious because the last Elseworlds title, before I started to collect comic books again, that I purchased is a story called Kingdom Come, which many people like myself are hoping DC animation will turn into a movie. It was a Mark Waid written title. Alex Ross does the artwork. It's beautiful. It's basically a further future where a lot of the classic DC superheroes went into retirement, and there is an influx of new heroes and villains that come into the world of DC. But the difference between the old and the new is that the new are very self-centered, and they don't care about the concept of protecting civilians. They will fight the forces of evil, but they will leave a ton of damage in their wakes. And it causes Superman to get the band back together and come out of retirement to stop this new group of heroes. It's one of the best stories that DC ever gave us. It's 25th anniversary this year, so my friends and I are going to be reading and reviewing those over at That's Comical. We're very excited to reread the story. So I didn't really know where they could possibly go after a great story like that, but Superman Red Sun, even though I haven't read it yet, I am blown away by this story. And Superman Red Sun is, simply put, instead of Kal-El crash landing in the middle of America in Kansas, he falls to Earth right around World War II into communist Russia, the Soviet Union, and he becomes the Russian hero in the style of communist rule. So I can't necessarily say that that's a good thing to see in comics or not, but I think that this book and this movie is definitely the product of the time in perfect timing, because there's so much discussion about different roles and ways of governments these days. So this story came out at the perfect time. So the fact the movie came out when it did was pretty good timing as well.
And I think that's why I was just so drawn into watching it multiple times, is just how much this resonates with, you know, our current state of the world, and just overall government power, how it's functions, how it's sanctioned, who's in control, who you think is in control, but who's really in control behind closed doors. And it was just really interesting to watch this, but not only from a current standpoint, but also from the historical perspective, because I mean, we even see Stalin in this film. We see that dark entity of how Superman kind of has the wool pulled over his eyes, and then when the blinders are taken off, he's still not 100% the good guy, but he's trying to kind of make amends. And I was just really floored by this. I mean, it's a really good story. It's dark in all the right places, but it's got that light-hearted feel to kind of get you hopeful for the future, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the best things about Elseworlds is that even if it's centered around a specific character, they always try to show the reader/viewer other members of the DC universe roped into this story. So I really appreciated the role that Batman has in this movie, the role that Wonder Woman has in this movie, the role that Lex Luthor and Lois Lane have in this movie, and that's what I actually want to specifically say that I think is the best part of this movie. I want to focus specifically on Superman, Lois Lane, and Lex Luthor. What I love so much about this story is that even though it's completely different takes on these characters, they still manage to keep those true mannerisms that make these characters what they are within these characters. Superman may be the Russian ruler, but he still has that good heart in regards to wanting to make the world a better place. And even though in this story he is doing it in a completely different manner, it's still Superman being Superman in a certain capacity. The fact that Lex Luthor technically in this film is the good guy for the United States and capitalism,
Yes.
he still has that crazy, perfect, familiar relationship with Superman. There is still that hatred. He still looks like he is some kind of a villain in Superman's world. And even in the eyes of the Watcher, which is so cool, it's just amazing how they managed to make it work so well.
And I think that's what drew me in for a second watch initially, because I watched it almost back to back. I mean, within a day of each other. I went back in and I'm like, okay, did I really see the dynamic between Lex Luthor and Superman that I thought I saw? And was Lex Luthor really the good guy? You know, because I'm second guessing how I watched the film. And I think that was one of the most brilliant elements of this film. Is just how likable Lex Luthor really was, and how well he played a presidential figure, how he just meticulously made everything work like a fine oiled machine, you know, for lack of a better term, because it was a machine that he was running. But also the dynamic of the relationship between him and Lois Lane. I guess in my mind, because I'm not such a huge Superman fan, I just always assumed the relationship between Superman or Kent Clark was different with Lois than it really was. I never realized there was a love spat between Luthor and Lane. So this for me was also kind of an eye-opening experience, and I really enjoyed the relationship between these two. It was real, you know, it really made it feel like a human relationship, because he wasn't the most thoughtful person. He forgot their anniversary. He forgot a lot of really important details, but he still kept her on a pedestal, and he still made her feel like the most important woman on the planet, you know, and he made it also known to others how incredible she was, you know, just what a great journalist she was. And he respected her not only as a woman and a partner, but her position, and he always put that first. And I think maybe that's why he wasn't the perfect partner, because he kind of put her career ahead of their relationship. You know, he made that the most important element of who she was. He didn't want to take that away from her, because I guess in some way, in a selfish way, that helped him be the person that he was, you know, but it just worked so well. And I really love that about this film. And the fact that Superman was this great character, he was the hero per se, but he still wasn't 100% pure. There was still a darkness to him, and that made this film really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you can't deny that one of the other powerful driving forces of this movie is the voice cast. I mean, never in a million years did I think that Jason Isaacs would voice Superman. You know, I always get excited when I see who these people, specifically, you know, it started with the great Andrea Romano, but Wes Gleason, I think, is like a fine wine. He gets better with every new movie that he does the voice direction for, ever since he took Andrea Romano's place when she went into retirement. And getting Jason Isaacs to voice Superman is so unexpected, but it was beautiful because he brought so many dimensions to this character. I looked at Superman in a whole new way. And the same could be said about Diedrich Bader voicing Lex Luthor. He had that, you know, businessman feel and that scientist feel, and of course that very self-centered personality that Lex Luthor has always had in his voice. And Diedrich Bader is great at bringing those types of personality traits into every single character. And you told me that you really appreciated the person who voiced Lois Lane.
I am a huge Amy Ecker fan. I have been a fan of hers since probably the early 2000s when she was caught up in the Whedon world. Joss Whedon, of course, who went on to make the Buffy the Vampire Slayer spin-off series of Angel, which she stars in. And I have just been enamored with her since those days. And so to hear her voice Lois Lane, who I've always held in high regard, was just a thing of beauty. I mean, she carried that character so well. I love to hear that strength of her character because I've seen her in action as a superhero in Angel. So I just feel that she carries that very feminine element to Lois Lane, but she also keeps that badass drive that Lois Lane has. And she was perfect for keeping Lex Luthor in line. You know, there was just that beautiful balance between the two. So yeah, I cannot sing her praises enough. I also have to give a tip of the hat though to Roger Craig Smith as Batman. I really enjoyed that element as well. I'm very picky about my Batmans, but Roger Craig Smith really pulled it out for me as Batman in this film.
Right. And of course, one of the other things that really makes this movie so interesting is the historic events that actually get changed ever so slightly. I mean, I love the fact that it's not the West that takes down the Berlin Wall. It is Superman that takes down the Berlin Wall and says there should be no walls. The fact that President Kennedy did not get assassinated and he actually fulfilled his term. There were just these little things that you see that are tweaked with history. And that's also, as people who appreciate history, that's another great positive about this film.
And those two elements, I'm so glad you highlighted both of those because those are exactly another reason why I quickly watched this film a second time, because I wanted to make sure that I was catching all of these things. I'm like, is my mind playing tricks on me, or was it really Superman that asked the Berlin Wall to be dropped, you know, or not even to be, you know, erected in the first place? And then, of course, you know, I'm a huge JFK fan. I'm a huge conspiracy theorist as a whole. So I actually rewound that part. I know rewind isn't really a modern day term, but I rewound it to that point just to make sure I was getting the dates right. I'm like, hold on, this is 1967. JFK should be dead. What is going on here? And then just that whole dynamic that was happening in what I guess is that supposed to have been Area 51? Because I'm not 100% sure exactly where Area 51 is at. I know it's in Lincoln County, Nevada, but I know that this was on a specific military installation. So I'm not sure if that is actually true to form in terms of the name of the territory that Area 51 is on.
That is supposed to be Area 51. Accurate? Yeah, that's supposed to be Area 51.
That alien moment, I mean, just how that tied in with the Green Lantern ring. And this is what I'm saying. These movies are getting me excited about learning about other things, because things that had never really captivated my attention before, or I had shown any interest in, because I know that you're a big Green Lantern fan and you really explore that universe to its capacity. But to have the alien on the table with the ring on its finger, I was like, oh, this is getting good. This is getting exciting. Where are we going with this, you know? And so there's just so many things that, again, I can still consider myself a comic newbie. To be immersed in this and be exposed to all these different multiverses and be enjoying what I'm watching is exciting, because it gets me interested in moving forward and reading other things or exploring other things.
Yeah, and I think one of the most interesting things that happens in this movie is how the balance between communism and capitalism is completely reversed in this movie. The fact that the United States is the one where the people are struggling, where the people are dealing with major job losses, starving, it's kind of crazy. But at the same time, you take a look at what's going on in Russia, and it looks like it's better, but it's really not a pretty picture. And that's where Batman comes into play. How Batman is actually a terrorist fighting for the little guy. I mean, he always fights for the less fortunate, but never in this capacity. And the story that he has, Forever Brief, and also how Wonder Woman fits into that story, that's a very, very powerful point in the film, because it makes Superman really question things. I mean, there's that scene at the beginning of the film where he takes on Superior Man, which obviously had a couple of specific things that we can relate to in regards to modern day history. And I also just want to let you know that that was not put there intentionally for certain reasons. As a matter of fact, that is part of the source material. Superior Man is in the first book. That doesn't really seem to faze Superman. It's when he sees the uprising of his own people, and he also sees the people who he thought were his friends don't look at him as a friend anymore. They look at him as a monster. That is where... And that's the other thing that's so interesting about this movie, because we know Superman. Superman is this person, while he does have his fortress of solitude, he is someone that appreciates the people, appreciates being around the people, appreciates having friends. And as he goes throughout the decades, I mean, I think one of the most horrible and saddest moments is the fact that you see him in the 1980s, and he's just sitting in his mansion, and he's just sitting by himself with his thoughts with the Brainiac robot, and it's just like he's alone. He suddenly realizes, like, and he thought that he was doing good all this time, but all it has done is it's just driven everybody away from him.
But I think that's a great point, and I think that's a really good thing to hone in on, because it's at that moment that you realize how deep he is affected, how deeply the blinders have been pulled over his eyes, and how much Brainiac has the ability to control that situation, and he's completely oblivious to it. He's just assuming that Brainiac is his friend. In that moment, I kind of attest Brainiac to Alfred, you know, how Alfred is kind of the counterpart to Batman in his moments of loneliness. But where Alfred is there for the greater good, Brainiac is not there for the greater good. There are some good elements to Brainiac, but at the end of the day, he is a robot, and he is designed to execute, and he is still there to see his purpose through. And so as we get to the later part of the film, we really do see that evil side to Brainiac, thinking, or kind of like telling Superman, you know, what you thought was going to happen, what you thought we were leading to, I had you fooled all along. You know, I was going to bring you here to this point anyways. So who do you think was going to win? You know, and it just kind of goes to show you too the power of technology and how much power we give it, which is kind of, you know, to the modern day pros of how much we rely on technology, and is it really our friend or our foe, you know? So these are the kinds of things I think of when I watch films like this. I was really surprised of that darker element to Batman, but in a way where, like you were saying, it was kind of to flip on Superman and really get Superman to live in the moment. Like, dude, get your blinders off. What you're thinking is a perfect world is the polar opposite. It's very clear that you have no idea what the hell is going on around you. And Wonder Woman, what a powerhouse. I mean, not only we know she's a strong woman, but she had such intellectual intelligence in this film. On both sides of the coin, she was handling her own universe, her own planet, her own people, but she was also a friend to Superman and helping him along until she just realized, I can't help you anymore because you don't care. You're on your own warpath. You're on your own agenda. And no matter what I tell you, no matter how I try to help you, you're still not getting it. So I'm just going to back off, and I'll see you through, but I'm not going to be your friend anymore. And I think once those words were said to him, that's what hurt him the most, and that's what inevitably ripped the blinders off, because he realized he truly was alone.
Yeah, exactly. And the two things that I specifically wanted to talk about, they're not major plot points, but they are definitely things that I really liked a lot. I loved the whole thing that they did to rope the Green Lanterns into the story. I mean, I loved the fact that they find the ring, and they do the American thing, which is basically take the power and they mass produce it to make their very own, dare I say it, this is their version of the Space Force. I love the fact that they had Hal Jordan be the leader of the United States Green Lantern Corps. I also loved that they had all of the other famous human Green Lanterns in there. Guy Gardner makes an appearance. Jon Stewart, who is voiced once again by Phil LaMarr from Justice League, is in this movie too. I loved that they did that. I thought that that was such a cool reinvention of the Green Lanterns, because we have to remember that because of the fact that they just pulled the ring off of this alien that I'm pretty sure that they killed and brought to Area 51, the people who have the ring have no contact to the Guardians or the Green Lantern Corps. So this is a world of Earth that never gets exposed to the Green Lantern Corps, and they just make their own Green Lantern Corps. And the other thing that I absolutely love about the end of the movie is that Jimmy becomes president of the United States. I love Jimmy Olsen becoming president. Great, great ending.
That was a fantastic ending. And let's not be nice. They cut the finger off of the alien. They didn't just take the ring off. They cut the whole damn finger off. They were like, nope, we're just going to take it. So that's true fashion of our government. We'll take what we want when we want it for our own personal use.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, I agree. Olsen as president was a fantastic ending. I loved all of the historical elements of this film. I loved the twist of the historical elements, but I also loved how politically driven this film was, and it works so well from the dark side of politics to the greater side of politics and the hope that we have by the end of this film. This film is superior. I give it two very high enthusiastic thumbs up. I will watch this again. This will probably be one of my top favorite films in DC animation.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, when I first saw this movie, I didn't give it a perfect score, but I have to give it a 4 out of 4 stars after watching it again for the purpose of this show, just because the one thing that I will say that I loved so much about this film was the innovative ideas. There are so many great ideas in this story. I mean, look, I love Gotham by Gaslight. I think that's a brilliant film too, but this and Superman Red Sun, even though they're both Elseworlds titles, it really is comparing apples to oranges. There we say it again. It's impossible to compare those two, even though they're in the same Elseworlds universe. But this story, when I watched this movie again, I was like, I just have to get my hands on these comic books. I want to read this original story. I am pretty sure I'm going to love it now that I have it, and I'm just glad I managed to get it for a good price, because these books are running for a lot of money right now. But yeah, this is a 4-star movie, and there even is a nice little treat in the special features on the Blu-ray. There's the DC Showcase, and we will get to the DC Showcases in a future episode. But yeah, this is a great, great film. So interesting, so different. History fans, politics fans, DC fans, animation fans, you are going to truly, truly love this, especially if you want to see something absolutely fresh. And one of the few things that I want to mention before we go on to the last film of today's program, what I really appreciate is the common thread that we see through all 3 of these films. There's a lot of messages throughout these 3 films that are very important in today's society. And we get that also in the first film of the brand new age of DC animation. After we see the ending of Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, we get a brand new version of Superman's origin in Superman, Man of Tomorrow. So I'm going to start off by saying I really appreciate the direction that DC animation is going in with this specific film to start it. The whole concept of Superman's origin story, even though it's not dramatically changed, there are just some interesting layers to it that we never really touched upon before. And I also really appreciate the animation. It's so different from anything that we've seen before in the world of DC animation. But even after seeing this a second time, I will appreciate the direction that DC Animation is going in, but I didn't think that this movie was the better film that I've seen. There are some problems that I have with this film, but we'll touch upon that as we move along. So what did you think of this one?
Yeah, this was definitely my least favorite of the three. I just didn't think the plot was as powerful. I think it had a lot of great elements to it. The storyline flowed. It still had a nice, I guess, beginning to what we had seen in the previous films in terms of, Lex Luthor having given way to presidency and things of this nature. So there was still a political drive in it. Lex Luthor was still very much at the forefront of the villain. But I don't know, there was just something, maybe it was because it took kind of a multi-universe feel for me that I couldn't stay grounded, so to speak, because there was just, I don't know. There's a lot to talk about. Now, I guess I'll just touch on it as you mentioned the things maybe that perturbed you. But another thing that I guess that just didn't hit home for me were the characters. It took me a long time to really like the characters or get into the characters. Like Lobo, for example. I couldn't stand Lobo until I had rewatched it for the third time. I'm just like, okay, now I'm going to appreciate you for what you are. And I think that sometimes maybe it does take that, rewatching a movie a couple of times and just kind of maybe focusing your attention elsewhere just to see if maybe you missed something. But if you have to watch a movie multiple times just to see if you like it, then it's still missing something. Like whereas Red Sun, I watched it 3 times almost simultaneously because I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. Where this one, I had to rewatch it just to find stuff I truly liked, so that there's a difference there. But I did like the alien element to it, but I just thought it was kind of weak in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, the message obviously in this film is all about the fear of the other. That's definitely the message that is portrayed in this film. Right. I mean, I will definitely say that one of the biggest positives about this film is Superman. I think that they get Clark Kent done beautifully in this movie. My favorite scene in the movie is actually the very beginning of the film, when he's watching that 1950s horror movie with his friend, and he's not crying because he's scared. He's crying because of the characters fearing the alien, and he's afraid that that's what's going to happen to him because he just found out that he's not from Earth. He's an alien from another planet, and it hurts him. I think that that is one of the best things that I have ever seen in DC animation, period. It was such a great idea to go in that direction.
It was a solid opener. I'll give it that.
Absolutely.
Because it definitely does gives a nostalgic feel of kind of the origin of Superman, and it really kind of just takes you back to the place setting of where it began. But yeah, it does in a sense kind of humanize and alienate him in a way too, because he's making that realization from a very young age, and you don't think of that in Superman when you look at him today, because he's obviously a grown man. So you think, oh, well, he's just always been Superman. He's just always known and been okay with this. But then when you look back at him as a child, you're like, oh, there is a dissociation because he is the last Kryptonian and he didn't know his parents and he didn't quite fit in. So, oh, there is that. I don't know, in a way it kind of gives it a young Batman feel, because you do get a sense of why these superheroes are the way that they are, because there was a tragic beginning. Whether they acknowledged it or not, there was a tragic beginning that kind of separated them from the masses.
Absolutely. And again, the origin story of Superman is really not changed at all in this movie. I mean, we do see him trying to become the superhero with his own homemade costume, which is something that we don't necessarily see in the comic books, but at the end, his mom still makes the costume for him like it's supposed to be. So that's great. I also really appreciate, even though I think it would have been better if we got a little bit more of it, and that's the relationship and the dynamics between Clark and John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, because I gotta tell you the truth, Cammie, that is something that I personally related to the most, because John tells Clark, yes, we're both aliens, but it is much harder for me to survive in this world than it is for you. And the reason why that is something that I relate to so much is because of my own personal stories. Look, I am a Jewish person. I am very proud of my faith. But unless I tell you that I'm Jewish, you don't know. So it is much easier for me to go outside in the open world and be myself than a person of color, because that person, unfortunately, could get entangled with the wrong people at the wrong time, and God forbid something horrible happens. And that's where I actually say to myself, wow, I know the history of Judaism and the Jewish people. Yes, we have been a people that have been persecuted and oppressed for many, many years, but there are a lot of times where the people that I belong to have been able to be there in plain sight and not be bothered at all. So the concept of that brought to this movie is something that just really hit home for me. And the funny thing was, it didn't hit home for me until I watched it the second time. Like, I understood it, but it's so funny because, as someone who was never driven by politics, who got so involved after 2015, I start to be a little bit more aware these days when I'm going out these days and just living my life. It was something that I never paid attention to, but now I pay attention to it all the time. And you want to know something? Dare I say it, that's one of the few things out there, whether you loved him or you hated him, that's one of the few things that Donald Trump did that actually made this country a better place. He made people more aware of their surroundings, and especially when it comes to the world of politics. You asked people who your congressman or woman or your House representatives were before 2015, you didn't know shit from a hole in the wall. Now you know everyone's name, I literally walk around these days saying, I want Ben Sass, the senator of Nebraska, to become the next president. I think he's fantastic. I love him. Anyone that appreciates Schoolhouse Rock and wants to bring civics back to the world of education is an A in my book.
I agree completely. No, I think that for me also was an element that I picked up the second time around, and that was probably the bread and butter of this film for me, was the relationship between Superman and John Jones. What I loved about it is, in essence, when he was able to activate that crystal-shaped sphere for him, he kind of became a father figure to him in a way, because he gave him a piece of his past that he was so desperately seeking, and he was the only one that had the ability to gift him with that. And not to say that he took the place of his earthly father or even his Kryptonian father, but in essence, I think that we're all given mentors along the way, along the path, and we have to appreciate them for what they give us in that moment. And John gave him something that nobody else could give him: his memories, his ability to tap into his memories. But he also gave him a very strong message with that memory, in that the last words your mother said to you was, don't dwell in the past because it inhibits your potential for your future. And by saying that to him, that said, you have the ability to take this as far as you want and to be, sulking in your past about the things that you cannot go back and obtain, or you can take what little bit I'm giving you and just project it into the future and really live up to your potential. And I think that, you said your strong point in this movie for you was the beginning. I think my strong point in this movie for me was the very end, when you see John and Superman and Lobo kind of just make that realization that they are truly the last of their kind, and that although they might not be the best of friends and they might not love each other, they can still appreciate each other for what each person represents, or what creature or being, whatever you want to call them, represents to their people. And that, hey, we're all in this together. We might not love each other, we might not be the best of friends, we might not see each other every day, but we are the last of our kind, and we have an innate purpose to see that through. We have an innate purpose to carry on the legacy of our planet, of our people, of our kind. And maybe we can just do that better if we come together. Of course, then he ruins it by saying he has to go take a massive dump in his planet, but I'm like, dude, you're just a trashy character.
Let's talk a little bit about Lobo, because clearly Lobo is someone that you're not really familiar with. So Lobo was a DC character that was created in 1983. He was basically DC's creation of, let me just make a badass anti-hero, you know? I'm not going to necessarily compare him to a character like the Punisher, because the Punisher has so many deeper levels, but he was just created to be this fun, rough and tumble character. And that's what he is. He's an anti-hero. He's a bounty hunter. You're not really supposed to take him seriously. But to a certain degree, his part in this story is actually more essential than you would think. I mean, let me just say this. When I heard that he was going to be in this movie, I was just saying to myself, how's he going to fit? Like, what are we going to see with him? Well, clearly what he does is he's a driving force for Superman, because he sees what aliens living in plain sight can do and what they're capable of, and that there are just some that don't have in their minds goodwill towards man. You know, they just live for themselves. They live in the moment. That is what Lobo has always been. He's never ever had those layers. He was just strictly made for the shits and giggles in DC Comics. That's Lobo. So that's basically what I liked about his character in this movie. He was a driving force for Superman to be the hero that he is today. Don't be like Lobo, be like Jean. That's what his driving force, that's Lobo's plot point in this story. That's why Lobo's here.
I will say I did grow to appreciate his antics where he would tell a fib and be like, nope, just kidding, I was just joshing you. That's really him. The case, you know, like he would start this elaborate story, especially when Lois Lane is doing like an interview and she thinks she's all serious. So there are more Kryptonians that we're expecting. Yeah, oh yeah, they're coming in massive forces. Just kidding, they're all dead. It's like, okay.
Yeah, that's Lobo.
I did grow to appreciate him, but yeah, he's just trash. He's just a gross man thing. I don't even know what the hell he is, but he's gross.
Yeah, that's what he's always been. And now I want to talk about two specific things, actually, that I do not like about this movie. I am not a fan of Lex and Lois in this movie. Not at all. I don't think that they gave these characters any depth. I mean, granted, I understand that this is supposed to be more about Clark and that this is about Clark becoming Superman, because one of the few things that you do notice in this film is the fact that there is no spark/love interest / crush between Lois and Clark in this movie at all. There is nothing there, no romance touching at all.
And that's kind of where my confusion came in, having come off such a high from Red Sun. There was such a beautiful relationship that was developed between Lex and Lois in that film, and then to come here, I was sorely let down. I just felt that he was cold, that she was so caught up in herself. She wasn't as loving and caring towards him as she had been before. And then I saw what I knew to be the dynamic between Clark Kent and Lois Lane, which was, there was kind of a spark there, which was kind of confusing, again, coming off the high of Red Sun. You know, it's like, no, I don't want you guys to be together. Now I want, you know, Lex and you to be together. So why is there like this flirting, you know, going on between? And I know that it's innocent. I know that it was kind of just so she could get what she needed out of Superman, because she obviously knew who he was and these sorts of things. And then there was some funny elements too, like when he left her hanging for the interview in the end after her smart ass comment of, you know, basically keeping him in the palm of her hand. But yeah, it didn't work for me either, Steve. I was really disappointed in that dynamic of this film. I thought they could have done so much better with the writing and just the chemistry there.
Yeah. And the worst part of this movie for me is the whole story about Parasite. I mean, it starts off so strong. The whole concept of Rudy Jones, this man who dedicated a portion of his life to military service, to become a janitor, struggling to feed his family. He becomes the parasite, and it starts off very well, but then they go in the direction of kaiju monsters, and he becomes this gigantic pink Godzilla. I was like, I think they took it a little over the top. I mean, they basically turned this character into, this is what's going to cause Superman to be recognized and appreciated by Metropolis. And quite frankly, based on where the story starts with Rudy Jones and where it ends, I think that it was a horrible direction to go into, because I love the scene at the beginning when Superman, when Clark is the coffee gopher, and he puts a little cinnamon in the coffee, and he tells the guy that he's working for, the cinnamon really wakes it up. He doesn't acknowledge it, but then Rudy has a cup of coffee, and he says, wow, the cinnamon really wakes it up. Like, I loved that dynamic between Clark and Rudy. I really, really did. And the fact that they just turn him into this Godzilla monster, and they drive those two, that relationship that was formed so far apart. I mean, granted, Clark knows that it is Rudy, and he's trying to tell everybody that this is not a true villain. He's unfortunately gone through this change and he needs help. But I still feel that when they get to that point, it's just too little too late.
Yeah, they ruined it. I think that had they kind of kept it that particular scene that you kind of referenced there, where he's confronted by a mob, Parasite is, kind of standing or hovering over the water, and the mob is just, get away from Metropolis, get away from our people, we don't want you here, and they're rowling that fire within him, and Superman on the latter part is like, no, we need to just calm down, he's not the enemy. I don't know that he ever comes out and says this is actually Rudy Jones, but I know that he does reference he has people here that he loves and that he cares about, and so you can kind of see that hue, that red purple hue differentiation, where he's kind of locking into his human element, so to speak, and there's a possibility to save them. If they would have kept Parasite in that phase right there, where he still had some human qualities, I think that would have been perfect, because although he would have never reverted back to his human form, because I don't think that was possible, I do think that he could have served some greater purpose, and some kind of a relationship could have been developed between him and Superman. But I think that it was either the writers got lazy and they just decided, you know what, we don't know what to do with this character, so let's just bring all that emotion to the surface to the point of boiling and he'll destroy himself, or they didn't want that dynamic between Parasite and Superman for any kind of future dialogue or any kind of future animation. That he was just a villain, that's what he was designed to be, and he was supposed to be destroyed.
Well, that's the truth, Cammie. You literally just answered the question, because Parasite is one of Superman's rogues gallery. He is one of Superman's villains. I just personally feel that when you take a look at Parasite's origins in Superman the Animated Series, there's much more of a driving force to Parasite as a villain, that it basically eliminates any possibilities of a friendship between him and Superman, because in Superman the Animated Series, Rudy Jones is still the janitor, but he is not treated with respect by his people who work over him. He's basically looked at as just a lowlife. So when he gets these powers, he sees it as an act of revenge. When he encounters Superman, he sees Superman as a way to fuel and increase his acts of revenge. So I feel that the direction that they went with Parasite in this movie was the wrong way, because you eliminate any possible enriching of Parasite's villainy. That's what that's where I'm going with this.
Okay, so see, having not known that, I was able to catch both sides. Now knowing that, though, they should not have given him that humanity element, because by providing us with the humanity element in the beginning, you kind of connect to the character, and you're rooting for the good within them instead of the bad within them, so you see them as a potential fix versus as the villain of the film. So yeah, that was the wrong direction for the writers to have went.
So yeah, I basically fell in the middle with this one. For me, this is a 2.5 stars out of 4 film for me because, like I said, there are some great messages in this film that you can take away. There are some fun moments in this film. Again, I love the way they portrayed Clark, aka Superman, in this film. I think they did a great job with Superman on his own. And I also just love the animation. I just think that the animation is very unique. It looks like classic sketch animation. That's what I like. The thick black lines. I liked that. It was new, it was different. And whenever there's something that's new and different, especially when it comes to DC, those are the few things that keep these kinds of movies from truly tanking in my eyes. There are very few of these DC animated films that I don't like. There are always some redeeming qualities, no matter what they are. They're always there in these films. And that's just because I feel that the people who put these films together truly care about these characters and also truly care about the history. They're trying to preserve it while doing new things. But of course, the most important thing is they know the fans, they know what the fans like.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of hard with me because I do the thumbs, to say initially I probably would have given it a thumbs down, but because I did enjoy the finality of the dynamic between that final scene with Superman and John Jones and Lobo, I do think, like you're saying, there is something that will kind of always revitalize a film and give it some redeeming qualities. And so for that, I will give it a thumbs up. I did think it was enjoyable in terms of the overall storyline was solid. It did have a good flow to it. There were so many likable characters from previous films that I just did not care for in this film. It's definitely not going to be one of my favorites now or in the future.
Right. So that's pretty much going to wrap up another episode of the DC Animation Live Show. This was a very good conversation, Cammie. Just talking about these 3 films in particular, that was a lot of fun. I'm very excited to hear what your thoughts will be on Batman Soul of the Dragon, because if you want to talk about a really interesting take on Batman, I don't think you can get more fresh than Batman Soul of the Dragon. But I'm also very curious to see how the rest of this year is going to pan out, because I've already seen the trailer for Justice Society World War II, and that looks fantastic. But the next time that we get together, we're going to go over the DC Showcase shorts. Those, I think, are going to be a lot of fun to go over. But I'm going to be very excited to come back to you all with Cammie to discuss more of these amazing DC animated films, because at the end of the year, we're going to take a look at all of 2021's films and we're going to discuss them. But in the meantime, everybody, once again, thank you all for watching. This was so much fun, and we will see you in the next one. If you enjoyed the video you just watched, feel free to leave a comment. Also, feel free to subscribe if you want to be up to date with our latest videos. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next one. Actions speak louder than words.